that case, he knew what they had to do. He stood in front of the monsters, and then smiled. When the knights began to run past him, Ted ordered everyone to stop panicking because this was their chance, and if they got rid of the leader of the pack, the rest of the wolves would lose their will to fight. He decided to leave all this to Xian and Alita, and he himself was going to protect the soldiers. The protagonists did not answer him, realizing that they got all the dangerous work. Being a hired hand was very hard. He left the leader with Alita, and he himself was going to make sure that the other beasts did not come close. She was surprised by his continuation, and he admitted that he did not really want to run away because they could handle several firewolves. One of the monsters tried to attack them, but Xian killed it with one blow, after which he told Alita to act. She resolutely agreed, running towards the leader, but it opened at its mouth, directing a stream of energy towards her. She managed to dodge to the side, swung her sword, and struck, and from this the monster screamed in anger. Alita remained focused and attacked again, and Xian noticed that she was strong and knew that there was no need to worry about the leader. But his eyes widened as electrical discharges began to emanate from the monster's body, and Alita was afraid, and the next moment, one of the especially strong electrical discharge hit her, throwing her to the side. The wolf grabbed Alita with its teeth, and the protagonist excitedly shouted her name. He remembered how he thought about it when she asked why he needed her. In the end, he decided to be honest to avoid misunderstandings in the past. He was summoned by sacrificing the hearts of nobles, and because of this, he was obliged to stay in Tanner, despite the will of the emperor. However, this time, he came in a way that was more like a summoning than a sacrifice, so that connection with the summoner was the guarantee of his existence in this world. In other words, would return to Earth again if Alita died, so he ran after the leader to save Alita. She lost consciousness, and she cursed because he did not have enough combat energy to speed up at the same time as he continued to run. The energy consumed, and he remembered he waited years to get here and was ready to fall naked from the sky. The main thing was to end up in Tanner. That's why he was angry that he could go back. Because of something like that, he concentrated her gi near his sword using the energy of the dragon sword and directed an attack towards the beast. The monster was distracted by the flash of energy, and Sean concentrated, then sighed, noticing the splash of blood next to him. The wolf dropped Elliot from its mouth, and the protagonist lay down next to her on the ground, glad that they were alive. He tried not to overexert himself and almost went back home because of it. Sometime later, they made a fire and sat next to it, and Xian asked Ali how it felt. She was bitten by the beast, and so he was worried that she might be in pain somewhere. Alit's whole body ached, but she said that the leader did not want to kill her. She did not even know that Thiefru wolves have a tradition of giving living people to the leader. She was shocked that she, the highest swordswoman, was mistaken for food, and Sihan laughed. It was the first time they both saw a firewolf that struck lightning and assumed it was a mutation. However, they killed it, so everything was fine for now. Alita thought for a while and then called out to Xian. Since she did not need it before, but since they became allies, she needed to know something. Xian heard why he was revealing his true identity, since the 6 kingdoms were countries built by his comrades, and wherever he went, he would be welcomed. The protagonist admitted that he would be lucky if he was not executed, since they stabbed him in the back and forcibly sent him to Earth with the magic of return as soon as he killed the emperor. It had only happened for a few minutes, but he remembered it so clearly. Even though years had passed, he could not understand his former comrades and still did not know why they betrayed him. Neither of them hesitated at all, which meant that it was not a hasty decision. He did not understand what he was thinking and how he could not see through his true intentions after so many years of being together. Alita was silent for a while, and Sean assumed that she was in shock, sure that she would be punished because now she was involved in a conflict against all the countries of Tanner. She realized that he had returned for revenge, and that was why he hid his true identity. The protagonist assumed that she could have misunderstood him, but she understood everything and did not understand such a reaction. Sean did not know why she was so calm, because he had practically declared war on all 6 kingdoms of Tanner. However, all of these kingdoms were already enemies of Alatand. She had been fighting against Tanner for the past years. No one gave her a choice, but she did everything she could. The protagonist noticed that she was hopelessly positive, and she remembered that her father often said that to her. Sean assumed that she was talking about the emperor, but she got angry since she was not talking about that psycho. Viewed about her real father, Karen, the protagonist, did not answer her since he flinched, having felt something. He told her to wait, since something was heading that way, and looked towards, assuming that it was an enemy, but Xian did not want to believe it, since he did not understand why someone would send people to look for them. He assumed that it was one of the lost Berlon squads, but he warned them not to let their guard down. Was Abato voiced his guest about this, and at that time Xenon came out from behind the bushes, apologizing to them, so he wanted to ask them on the way. Xian and Alita froze, surprised that it was him, and realized that it was a spy from Lilin Hela. At them in confusion, he did not understand what they wanted to say. But before he could say anything, Alita pulled out her sword, attacking him. He screamed, dodging, and asked them to wait. Since he did not want to fight, Chon appeared behind him, concentrated energy near his palm, and noticed that Xenon did not want to attack. But he was going top at him to sleep for a while. He threw him into the air with one blow, and he paying attention to the skill. Realized thought he was right. He managed to minimize the effect of the skill on his body, stopping his flight, and the protagonist was surprised. Xenon soon landed nearby, and Xian asked in confusion, how did he manage to connect it? He used this skill when he was a child, so very few people knew about this skill, even among his old comrades. That's why he was curious. Ubo too. Xenon was, and he didn't answer right away, but he thought that he was sure of something. Now he suddenly put his hand in his bag, and the protagonist became wary when he noticed this movement, but the next moment, his wariness was replaced by surprise, as Xenon suddenly turned away, showing the item he took out on his outstretched palms. He assumed that these panties belonged to Xian, and he, as well as Alita, froze in shock. Xenon pleased, and the protagonist displeased, ordered Alita to kill him. After all, he was just a pervert. Xenon asked him to wait, sure that this was a misunderstanding. He got nervous and said the first thing that came to his mind. However, Xian himself noticed that they were panties, so he told Alita to kill Xenon. He shouted that he surrendered, and the protagonist asked in displeasure why he was waving his underwear instead of a white flag. If he was going to surrender, repeated his order to Alita again, deciding to help her kill Xenon. But suddenly he fell silent, noticing a stripe on the waistband of his underwear. It was in Korean, and Xian also recognized his own handwriting, unrealized that it was indeed his underwear. Xenon confirmed this, asking if it was true that he was a savior from another world. His eyes did not deceive him, but the protagonist did not seem impressed, since he did not have even 1,000th of his energy right now. Xenon assumed that he remembered him, and told him that he was a child he saved years ago. He reminded him that he was from Baron Village, and Xian thought about it, and Xenon told him that he finished off all the Imperial soldiers who attacked their village with that skill. Thanks to this, Xenon was saved, and it was only after some time that he learned that his benefactor was a savior from another world. When he began to use fighting energy and became a swordsman, he learned the art of nullifying the attack power that the protagonist showed. Then it was a thoughtful skill to avoid unnecessary casualties, which showed Sun's consideration for other people, and so he was especially admired by him. Now the protagonist remembered that back then he only wanted to test the new skill, but he did not talk about it, since everyone had different views on it. However, he suddenly noticed that Xenon was the child he saved years ago. This meant that he was younger than Xian, and Xenon revealed that he had recently turned. He looked very mature in the protagonist's opinion, and he declared that appearance was only one side of a person, and it was what was inside that determined a person's worth. Xian wondered where he got that cheesy phrase from, and Xenon reminded him that it was a quote from the protagonist himself. He was a middle school student back then, and now he was surprised that he was like that. Still, Xenon's respect was understandable, but he found it strange that he carried his underwear around with him. He asked him to hide it, but he exclaimed that it wasn't just underwear. He had a Xion figurine that was exactly like that moment, and he also had numerous books and drawings of him. He collected everything that had to do with him, and the protagonist was shocked by this information. Xenon, meanwhile, added that his underwear was special because he wore it during the battle with the Mad Emperor. Lad Xenon was lucky enough to get it at an auction, and has spent half a year's salary on it. Xion understood everything, and asked Xenon to put the underwear back in the bag. He actually listened this time, and then declared that he had sworn to serve the Lilstein family, because the king was Xian's comrade, he knelt down, holding out his sword as he wanted to use his weapon. To serve the protagonist knows and thought about it, wondering what he would do if he considered the Lil Steam family his enemies in that case. Zen and Wold also think the same way, and the protagonist noticed his gaze, knowing that he was serious, and the end he agreed because if Zenon knew who Xion was, he still couldn't let him go. So easily he accepted his sword, and he smiled happily, promising that he would do his best and not disappoint him. He was also about to destroy all the remaining fire wolves, but the protagonist noticed that they had already finished everything themselves. He pointed to the leader off to the side, but Zenon reminded him that fire wolves always come in pairs. He thought that they used the M's corpse as bait for the female, and these words made Xion freeze in shock, and then ask again, in fear. The next moment, they heard a loud roar, and realized that everything happened just in time, as another monster appeared next to them, which was Mucklerger. Then the other leader of the pack, Sean, realized that if fire wolves walked in pairs, and it was not surprising that there were two leaders in the pack. He did not understand why he did not think of this, and Elite was unhappy there that such an experienced person did not know elementary things. However, this happened because a larger number of years had passed, and for example, an adult after graduating from high school would not be able to solve the equation right away, and there was the same logic here. Alita was surprised since she did not know what an equation was, but Sean decided that it did not matter since she would not have understood it anyway. Zenon asked the protagonist to let him handle this, and he was going to show what he could do. Xion allowed him to do so, and Zenon stood in front of the wolf, thinking that he had the chance to work with the hero. He had tried to look up to his entire life, and also protect him. However, he did not make a good impression, having been slammed into the ground twice, and he was not happy about it, so he now concentrated a large amount of energy near you, intending to show his true strength. This time and gain Sean's recognition. Alita was amazed by his fighting energy, but the protagonists did not seem impressed, not understanding why. Zenon was putting in so much effort. The wolf prepared to attack, and Zenon directed his own magical energy towards it, and screamed. He struck several times, and it seemed stunning to Alita, as Zenon fought back against the giant beast without receiving a single scratch. This meant that he would easily defeat her in a fight, and suddenly Sean noticed that Alita was very strong for her age, but Zenon was also quite good. He had several talents, and Alita was indignant, because in her opinion, it was not just several talents, she was annoyed by geniuses. The protagonist explained that there were many talented people around him, suggesting that he had inflated expectations. He himself was not a genius, but rather an exception, because he was an earthling. Lavina, for example, was a real genius, but Alita did not respond to this remark. Wolf, meanwhile, concentrated fire near his mouth, and then directed the flames towards Zenon. He cut it with his sword, warning that this fire will not even scratch him. He jumped, preparing to deliver the finishing blow, and warned that this is the end. Lita suddenly became afraid, and Xion noticed the wolf's position, and the next moment a bolt of lightning pierced Zenon and he fell to the ground. They all felt Giovanni. Alita was terrified that she fell as shamefully. Zenon didn't understand why the fur wolf was beating with lightning, and Alita suggested that she figure it out herself, but Xion decided to join the battle himself, because he could work with magic better than anyone here. Alita remembered this because he was from another world. The thing is that the Imperial army of monsters was feared, not only because of strength, because otherworldly creatures could not be damaged by magic, and it did not matter how strong the magician was. This law also applied to Sean, who came from another world, so now he stood in front of the wolf. The monster sent fire in his direction, but the protagonist did notice and think to defend himself because it did not work with him. Absolute immunity too. Magic last time helped him succeed, and he had to pretend to run away because of the large number of extra eyes. However, the lightning bolt set by the wolf still struck him, and he was terrified because of it. He was angry, and also did not understand why the magic worked on him. This had never happened before, but he distracted himself from his indignation, turning towards the wolf that had disgraced him in anger. He swung his sword, cutting the monster in two, and when the monster fell to the ground, Xian thought because the fire did not affect him earlier, and that was why he did not understand why the lightning bolt hit him. The next moment, Zenon ran up to him, worried about his condition, but the protagonist did not respond to his concern, but simply asked him to call him by his name. since they met him on Fentnet. Zenon tried to refuse, since he could not do something like that, but before they could continue talking, Abuti, the wolf's body, was engulfed in light, gradually beginning to dissolve. Everyone was very surprised by this, and Shen honestly admitted that he did not understand what it was sometime. Later they returned to Ted, and he was happy that they had survived. Now their lands were free of monsters, and it was all thanks to them. He paid them pieces off silver, and as Xian and Alita left the estate, the protagonists thought about how they would need more money in the future. However, getting such a sum for one task was already good, and it meant that if they completed all the difficult tasks, they would completely get rid of money problems. However, such tasks were not given every day, because this time, they were just lucky. Alita's words really made sense, and at this time, Zenon came closer to them. Curious about how everything went, he noticed that they said that they needed money, and showed a bag that contained gold coins. She and Alita were very surprised by this, and they wondered where he got such money. He sadly lowered his head, crying, and explained that he sold the Savior's artifact, that is the panties. The protagonist, noticing Zenon's disappointed state, realized that he had asked in vain, and added that if it would help Sean then he wouldn't mind. Alita thought about it, realizing that Zen's underwear could be sold for a lot of money, but he ordered her not to even think about it since this thing weighs, not because he wore it, but because it was limited edition. Zenon was distracted from this topic of discussion, since he was interested in what the protagonist was planning to do. Now this money should be enough for now, and there was no need to work as mercenaries for a while. Sion had 3 options, but he had not yet decided which one to choose. There was one place that would not be difficult to conquer, but suddenly, he fell silent, noticing something, and laughed, since he would soon see the face of a person he knew before. Alita and Zenon looked at him in bewilderment, and he decided that their destination would be the north, and the kingdom of Jacksonguard, soon, in a laboratory. In the kingdom of Lilithron, contacted King Lilin. Through magic, it had been a while since they had seen each other, but it was still not time for a scheduled report, so Lilin did not understand Witherin contacted him. He explained that they would not need to hire anyone for test subjects, and as the kingdom of Barcelon had taken care of it themselves. Lilin was surprised that this was true, but he still admitted that these test subjects were not very strong, but there was more to it than that, as they had also lost test subject tone. This only further surprised Lil Stein, and also angered him, and he skied again, assuming that Thrawn had gone completely crazy. He did not understand what they were being paid for, and Askido he could call himself the head of the Blue Ivory Tower. The thing is, there were for magic towers in Tanner for 1,000 years, which included the red, white, blue, and black ivory towers. The first emperor of the Lin Kingdoms was the most powerful mage in history, and he collected all the knowledge and wisdom from the mages of all of Tanner, and placed the records in the 4 towers. This was divided into classes, and placed it in different floors and so on. One of these levels, the mages learned their level of magic. As they advanced in their magic skill, they would go up to the next floor to study, and that meant that floor showed the EMS skill. Lilin himself, waist head of the red Ivory Tower on the 9th floor, he was too furious about what happened, and warned that the only reason Tron was in such a high position was because more suitable candidates were executed. He suggested that Tron was expecting to be fired since he was only worthy of the 8th floor. At most, he gave him one last chance, ordering him to quickly deal with test subject number 1 and cover his tracks. He immediately agreed, promising that he would not let Lin down this time. When the communication session was ended, he sighed, glad that he was at least given another chance soon. In the capital of Ratton's Cell, in the kingdom of Vev Jackson, Guard the Squire reached one of the rooms in the palace, and approached Jackson. Guard Rothenberg, who was interested in the reason for his visit, invited him in for a glass of alcohol. But he was not at all happy about Jackengard throwing another party. But Halad, asking if a man could be happier, the days when the Empire was hunting Hymno seemed like a distant dream, but the squire warned that in the eternal feast and celebration, Jacksengard forget about political matters. He was afraid that this could lead to his authority among the people being shaken. But Jacksengard warned him not to be afraid, because he was not a bad ruler. After all, it was not He spent money from his own pocket, but the squire was dissatisfied because it was the taxes of Jackson Guards. People Jackson Guard added that he did not have a percent tax like the previous emperor, but the squire thought that his tax was percent in addition. Jackson Guard did not burn hundreds of villages forcing tens of thousands of people to become slaves, but he punished hundreds of villages and also forced tens of thousands of people to join the army, and yet the squire did not say anything out loud. And Jackson Guard suggested that Hestel deserved this small reward for overthrowing the previous emperor. He reminded him that this emperor was very cruel, and asked how he could be compared to him. After all, the poor had no choice, and squire wanted to argue, but Jackson Guard cut him off, assuming he couldn't take a hint. The squire was scared by his menacing appearance, and fell silo bare. Bowing and leaving, he knew that Jackson Guard had gone too far. He had the ability to fight, but he had no management skills, and it would be great if there was someone who could make him take responsibility. All of Jackson Guard's good humor had evaporated, as he had been having a good time, but now it was ruined. Supposed he should fire Squire, but before he could think about it any further, another of his subordinates entered the room, calling him the savior of the world and the hero of all heroes. He was honored to meet him, and Jackson Guard was immediately pleased when he recognized his visitor. As the Duke of Catron, he apologized for disturbing him, but there was something that needed Jackson Guard's attention. He thought it was no big deal, since he had always liked Keltron. Keltron handed him some papers that he needed to sort out, and Jackson Guard took it, and actually looked at the papers for a while, but then he threw it away, since he didn't care, and he ordered Keltron to take care of it himself. In his opinion, it was the king's duty to protect the defenseless, and he had no time for insignificant matters. Soon on the western outskirts of the capital, Ratzlin, the kingdom of Jackson Guard, Sean and his companions stood near an old house, realized that he had bought the house after all, and he warned them that they would attract attention if they stayed in the inn for too long. This house was to be their temporary base of operations, and Xenon agreed that he was right. But he still wanted to object, and Sean was surprised that there was some problem with that. Xenon did not understand how the protagonist could stay in such a dump, and exclaimed that if he knew, he would sell his house to buy something better. Cheon ignored his cries, and simply decided that they go through once they were inside. He noticed that it was not as bad as he thought. They need to clean up, but before Sion could continue his reasoning, Xenon exclaimed that this place was cursed, so they could not stay here any longer. He threw Elite and the protagonist out of the house since they were distracting him from cleaning. The next moment, he screamed, emitting magical energy in order to speed up, and began to clean up. Alita supposed that this was not what normal cleaning sounded like, but she and Sean did not interfere. Soon everything was ready. When the protagonist and Alita entered the house, it was much more often than before in Xenon's opinion. The squalor was still there, but now it was not so terrible to walk here. Sean found this amazing, and Xenon added that the only thing missing was furniture. Suddenly he noticed a dirty spot, and was horrified by it, and the protagonist wondered why he was obsessed with frequency. Alita realized that spitting on the floor was the most effective tactic in the fight against Xenon. In the end, Sean admitted that it was a good job, and it was not bad for a start. Now that they had a base, they could prepare for the fight against